Thank you. So, Darryl Wellington, you're actually the sixth laureate poet of Santa Fe. So I hope you can explain to us what does that mean. And
Sure.
you're going to be sharing some of your writings and poetry with us today. So we look forward to closing this amazing morning for the people in Santa Fe, or day, evening, wherever they're joining around the world. There's people all over the planet joining us. So thank you for being with us, and I'll hand it over to you.
Sure. I was enjoying some of the presentations myself. And thank you for being here. Thank you for inviting me here. Um, a poet laureate, I'm not sure where, for instance, Philip, you're from, but you have them all over the United States. Amanda Gorman at Biden's inauguration. It sort of means the official state or city poet. And that's what I am in Santa Fe. And so I go to a lot of schools and I talk about poetry and I also talk about my impressions of the city. A lot of my writing concerns racism. You'll see that. That was all in my application when I became poet laureate. And I'll start off being a poet after all this beautiful visual art. We're going to change our step a little bit here. And I'm going to read a poem. This first poem is very much about community in my way. It's about, and it's all from my book, which I hope Philip remembers to put in the chat, called Psalms at the Present Time by Darryl Lorenzo Wellington. And this poem, I'm originally from the South, is about a young man who goes to a tree where he has heard that lynchings have taken place. As I'm talking about a Black young man, now is dealing with the South, different from where I am right now. And yet it's also about the ghost of history, which is certainly relevant to Santa Fe, where so much is I would not say but controlled, but influenced by the past, haunted, if you will, by the past, and how that affects contemporary relations. And that's what this poem is actually about, where this young man goes to this tree where he has heard rumors that lynchings of Black men have taken place. And it's called And They Say, A Young Man Speaks. Heard there was a legend nearby. Damn, I see a tree, a Spanish oak, neither death nor the sun, neither death nor the sun. A church letting out, a family vanishing into the shadeless block. I kind of detest the blaze of Southern legend, less pure than simple lies. It may be gossip's swiftest avenue to retooling its alibi for cruelty. Legend has it the man was lynched, noosed, his flesh charred unrecognizably as afterbirth, his clothes tossed to the rags of history, an oil-soaked human torch. His body just a clock, broken by drunken sailors, slammed against a brick wall, loosening the memory of pain's instruments, uncharted. He was twisted beneath a limb, preserved in a square on blank street. The oak still living, serpentine, Gothic, longer than any accusatory finger. The family approaches to read a plaque, I guess. Nah, the garden fence is only to protect the tree, maybe, from pest, locust, and blank odd threats. The victim lay blinded first. He was a soldier. His heirs, his relatives, say this, say that. or who says much beside the steady erosions of tick tock? Trace his body in civic sands, trace a memorial in the public dust. This is a Maypole Sunday. Adults matter less than Esplanade children. Kids still matter more than strangers. Not oak nor ivy could make the tale charming, or pretend history isn't a playground rumor. I shouldn't say that anyhow. No matter the last surviving witness stands like a testimony which faintly incriminates, like silences after a death. Still was a ceremonial killing, I guess. Expect the dead inhale, exhale, like memory's breath. Pretend the oak tree called for a funeral hush. Pretend happenstance may someday honor it, like a storm which turns away from a ghost house. And they say, rumor, legend, gossip is a contour, a profile in sidewalk chalk, a bag of bone. None of the skeletal anatomy filled in, nor veins. Children crayon inside it colorfully. I heard about a fable woman, conjurer, slave. Though she was real, neither, both, I still know she was black. No rights of the fastidious macabre. Change that. Human scarifications. Her lips sewn shut. Probably talk too much, they say. Yes, she was alive. Her nasty fibs punished. Now the story's a retired flag folded up till it flaps in the breeze. Occasionally it snaps like a pocketbook. The tongue clucks like a pocketbook. My life beneath the limb of a story, playing a stranger's. My life playing a respectful Sunday stroller's part in a dumbstruck village is over. The present begs a way to live together here. Thank you. Now let's talk about those very last lines. My life playing a respectful Sunday stroller's part in a dumbstruck village is over. The present begs a way to live together here, because this does certainly relate to our subject of community. How do we live with the present, with the past? How do we forge community? I will say this just because I'm many in my presentations in Santa Fe, this needs to be said. This in the little I've heard, and you will often hear many peons to the immense diversity and beauty and the cultural mix in Santa Fe. These are all true. I'm not saying that these are all true. And so you may say, well, then isn't this a contradiction? Because it's also a very divided community. Well, that's how it is. They're both true. I can give you a perfect example right now. Santa Fe is incredibly diverse, but in many ways it's also very segregated. You see this in neighborhoods. Right now I'm living in an artist community, very sophisticated people. But because it's a community of about 100, unusually in Santa Fe, in this particular area, it's unusually diverse. You have Chicanx and Anglos living together in a very neighborly way, but already fault lines develop. And you can see this very clearly. And this is the past. This is the effect of the past haunting the present. And what I say is not strictly true of Santa Fe, it's true of all America, right? Let's make that very clear. That's why this is an important subject, because we all know that race doesn't exist, and yet it so influences human behavior. and it hasn't gotten particularly better. With that, I will read another poem. And this was written, I don't want to get too political here, shortly after the election of a certain person I won't mention. And it's called How to Live with Racism in Times Like These. And it's in two parts. The first part is like a diagnosis of a disease, racism. You'll be able to tell when I come to the second part. It's very hammering type poem. And then the second part is a sort of diagnosis, as much as a diagnosis can possibly be had. How to live with racism in times like these. And so, become used to the feeling at all times that the flesh, flagellated feverish puffiness, in particular poignant places where the vertebrae curves, is melting to angst gone to crap. Study the stool, such daily craps, like a horoscope synchronized to feelings, how functional systems midway curve, until past internalized bile mulches flesh, pours into the heartfelt places susceptible to psychosomatic illness, puffiness. Practice using herbs and lotions. Puffiness calcifies the skin's breath. Asthma is crap, left psychically undigested. Benign places where you suffer sudden stress, feeling an atavistic stiffness, hammer flesh to an ancient bone, and a bad back curves. Negative socialization stymies sleep, curves sally to crip walk, toothsomeness to puffiness, self-enfolding lumps of riddled flesh, bulk beneath shy lids, sleeps a crapshoot in a puzzled welter, feelings stiffen like chess pawns in the wrong places. Acknowledge the health burdens, angst places, in between dolor and the daily curves, Murphy's Law, throwing sobriety to feeling if judgment intervenes, hives, cancer, puffiness, the apocalypse's four horsemen coming crap all over a calm facade. Death is inherent in the flesh. And death's mode in bad times is bruised flesh, softening slowly in the wrong places. Listless fatigue leaves shit, crust, crap, putrefying the toilet rim. Meals skipped, curveball self-implode memory, sock sacrifice. Puffiness is generic putty. Enthusiasm low, no feeling. 1, 2, 3, 4. Cut the crap, feed the flesh, avoid blackouts. Because honestly speaking, there's sudden relief. Taking a breather allows one-shot self-analysis, less urgent care than homing in on memory lapses. Finish tasks, scrub the tub, walk the dog, tip the jar, round the curves, round the curves. Struggle with memory against forgetting to see. Eye strain, a feeling of puffiness in places. Beware. Struggle with memory against forgetting to flush. Thank you. And I'll read one more before we go to a more conversational part. And this is a poem that I wrote in tribute to the Black Lives Matter movement, which is a great influence upon me. And especially during the period, as I'm sure, well, that you remember, after the George Floyd killing, and which I thought was a very positive period because we were finally talking about things that needed to be talked about and still need to be talked about. And we'll get around to talking about them eventually. I have no doubt about this whatsoever. But this poem is a tribute, and I participated in many marches and spoke at many rallies and such. And this is called Days of Protest. And it opens with a little quote from Mayakovsky, the Russian poet. We will smash the world wildly. We will thunder. Losses and roses and dreams debased by poets will unfurl. And now my poem, Days of Protest. We will not disappear. Like her birth name, like his dead letters, buried inside a sheaf after a flash rain. We will not disappear. Death yawns stately. Death conjoins us. Whether we make music, noise, love, or bourgeoisie war. Free assembly and funeral rites these days. Symbiotic, interchangeable. Siren sounds. We will not disappear. We proceed like marionettes, carried along on one string. Crowds of self-same miles. Our tongues chant now in unison. The pitch like a cracked accordion. Then canticle is cant and cry. And the dead also. They will not disappear. Death conjoins us. The streets indigenously compel us, whether we lay down and recharge, screaming at planned events. Protest marches and vigils have become intermarried, like a sexual transgression. Death conjoins us. Death pulls back the curtain. Public war, like private mourning, pulls back the curtain. And old law is a heavy sigh. Its retellings latchkey shibboleth. Blood nurses grief. Grief nurses war. And what else is changed to soldiers and mourners? We wear hoodies and chains. Hoodies, sneakers, jerseys, chains, lining the streets carrying play cards, banners, and loudspeakers, amplifying Trayvon, Rihanna, Eric Garner, Freddie Gray, Philandro Castile, George Floyd, like aggravated parlor ghost. And sound systems reify the abstractions. Let the crowds inspire regardless. Belief in eternal secession. Then we seize the streets. Then we seize the streets at noon and night, but dispassionately challenge standard badges of the numinous state. Officers in bright, dark felt glasses breaking past the front lines berate us. The blue lines aggress. but we seize the streets at night. We amplify, we reify. We amplify using cost-efficient instruments of bulbs, amps, wattage. Crackle and hum break daylight monotony. Then we seize the streets at noon and night. Like visionary candle wicks afloat on sea and surge, but the sea will never swallow the candles burning brightly. And amplify and reify. Flesh of my physical atrophy, death's indigenous people, shortchanged before destruction, who will not disappear. Like her birth name, like his dead letters, after a flash rain. Thank you. So that's your word from our present poet laureate. So now, are there any questions? I mean, I could read more, or we could just talk some, rap, speak.
Thank you, Darryl. Maybe Lee and I will speak to you for a couple minutes as we round up the day. This is a very powerful and poignant way to, I think, end our webinar, which has been, of course, about celebrating diversity, but also reminds us that through hope, we actually have a lot of work to do. And I see some of the comments of people complimenting you for this very powerful presentation.
Well, you should, to remind, you should put a link to my book. All those poems are in my book, Psalms at the Present Time, which I would prefer you to get on Bookshop, not Amazon. I don't think that's a controversial statement here, right? Because we're all about grassroots things. So I would prefer that Bookshop. Yes, that link I gave you is to Bookshop. Yes.
Absolutely, we use that link. So that's the one that's above in the chat. Lee, you're still on mute.
I have to mute because there's too many prayers today.
Oh.
It's the party of the mouton, of the sheep. So all families are celebrating. Darryl, you brought us back and down to earth in the most powerful way with these words which are seemingly nonchalant, and also the way you propose the words is quite powerful and almost like an actor. So you make the words come alive very, very strongly. I'm very moved. We cannot understand exactly the American situation, although racism exists in other countries. It doesn't seem to have the same extreme sort of form as in your country. But we hear from everybody what's happening, and it's not getting better, it's getting worse every day, the situation in the country. So thank you for helping us understand.
Well, go ahead. I'm sorry. Yes.
That's fine.
Oh, well, I mean, sure. It is a subject I go back to because I do feel that it's one of the main things that let us assume, and this may be a wrong assumption or a limited assumption, that the people here are progressive, that that our thoughts or our feelings tend toward a progressive agenda. And I think it's one of the main things that keeps us from getting things together. I mean, and I see this in the city where I live. People always assume, oh, I'm above that. I understand that is not that, that's just an illusion, that we have more in common. Yet if you look at people's actual behavior, I'm not sure it's not the primary motivator of their actual behavior. this group looks like me. I have to stick with this group. This group is my people. You know, maybe what they say doesn't make any sense, but that identification in and of itself will often outrank any sort of intellectual, more even sometimes moral commitment. And it also leaves all positive agendas.
Oh, you're frozen.
I am.
Darryl.
No, it's okay. It's just Lee's camera.
Is there something we can do right now, Philip? Philip, are you frozen too?
You're frozen.
Yeah.
But let me just finish the thought. Where was I at? It'll strip out, it'll negate those interests, and it'll also.
Is somebody in the audience listening still?
Yeah, Lee, we all hear. It is probably a problem with your computer because everybody can hear. So he's wrapping up.
Right. Let me just wrap up this last point. Also, unresolved racial differences and sexism to another two always leaves the left open to manipulation, constant manipulation, which it falls for, in my opinion, again and again. That was my main point. You know, other people have covered this material probably more intelligently than I can, but I'm primarily a poet, and that's very much what I have devoted, as well as to poetry as an art. Poetry as a way of resolving historical trauma is very much what I'm about.
Thank you so much, Darryl. I think Lee unfortunately got cut off with.
I'm sorry. Yes, no problem. It happens.
I was the one cut off, or were you all cut off?
Yeah, there was a problem with your. Yes.
You were beautifully frozen. Sorry, yeah, I didn't get the answer.
Okay. Thank you once again, Darryl, and
thank you so much. And these art objects are just beautiful. It is a lovely city now, Santa Fe. All y'all looking out there, y'all come on down and visit here.
I'm sure people will. So